Now on Indianapolis This Week, preparing for the Pope. We sit down with the leader of the Indianapolis Archdiocese as Pope Francis gets ready to make his historic visit to the United States. Plus, looming shutdowns in Congress over Iran and Planned Parenthood. Republican Congressman Larry Bucshon joins us for a Sunday morning exclusive. And the moms working to end gun violence. The group that started in a Zionsville home plans a new campaign on Washington, one to begin in a matter of days.
From RTV6, the Indy Channel, this is Indianapolis This Week with Rafael Sanchez.
Thank you for joining us for Indianapolis This Week. You can join us right now on Twitter, our account at Indy This Week. We start with that historic visit just days away. Pope Francis set to arrive in the United States for a visit to the Northeast, with stops in New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. As the nation prepares for Francis's first trip here as Pope, I had the chance to sit down with the man in charge of the Catholic Archdiocese of Indianapolis, Archbishop Joseph Tobin, who knew the Pope when he was a cardinal in Argentina. Archbishop, thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome, Raphael.
The Pope will make his first visit ever to the United States. You know him. What will be his impression of our country?
Well, I don't know. I know he would be curious. Coming from Argentina, you know, Argentinians are aware of the United States, but some of the impressions aren't always positive, so we'll have to see, you know. But he loves people, and all sorts of people, and over the 10 years that I've known him, I have to say that what you see is what you get.
What will he tell families, not only American families, but it'll be a global audience will be watching every word he says?
I think he's going to affirm families and recognize the stressors that families feel. I think he's going to have a special place in his heart for families that are struggling with poverty, with, I think we could imagine he's going to say something about immigrant families and maybe touch on the policy of this nation that separates families by deporting a parent and leaving the children here by themselves, which happens all too frequently.
Yeah, this Pope is very vocal on first world issues, whether it's the economy, the environment, and even immigration. And our country right now is struggling with that, as you know, in the political world, building walls either along Mexico or building walls along Canada. Will he welcome that? Do you think he will address that without becoming political?
Well, I think he expressed that his original preference for entering the United States was to walk across the border, the southern border, just as part of the experience of so many people. As it is, he'll be flying in from Cuba, where he has played a critical role in mitigating the tensions that have existed between the United States and that island nation for the last, what, 50-some years. So, but yeah, he's aware of it. He's aware of it, too, because it's such a real problem in Europe. I mean, the daily loss of life in the Mediterranean Sea.
Sure. As Africans try to get to Italy or try to get to Europe.
Exactly. And Africans, a lot of Syrian Christians who are fleeing from, you know, the fundamental evil of ISIL, you know, are trying to do it through the Mediterranean Sea, and they're losing their lives.
How does the church soften that discussion? Because at the end of the day, whether it's in Italy, the United States, immigrants are coming.
Yeah. I don't know if it's the church's responsibility to soften the discussion, but I think what it can do, Rafael, is soften fear.
Maybe that's my question. Yeah, how does the church then engage the discussion, as opposed to soften the discussion, engage the discussion?
Well, first you put a face on human beings. If you want to do evil things or harsh things to human beings, the first thing you got to do is take away their face. You have to make them anonymous. You have to make them a category. You have to call them 11.5 million illegals. And then you're able to make policies that, you know, would suggest deport them all. But if you meet a mother who's being separated from her children, you know, and is facing deportation, and the kids don't know where they're going to live or what's going to happen to them, and they're 14, 15 years old, that's a face. And the woman who has scrubbed toilets, you know, to feed her kids, I mean, that's a face. And I think that's what Francis is trying to ask us to do, is to see the face, recognize the humanity, and fix a system that's, everyone agrees, is broken.
The definition of family expanded in the United States with the Supreme Court ruling on same-sex couples. Will Francis talk about that, or will he talk about the family beyond the traditional family? And now that the court has ruled that all families are traditional, but how will he address that issue as part of the church discussion?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that Francis will respect the law of the land, and that the Supreme Court has ruled, and so is determined that you can marry anybody you want to, and that's a constitutional right. Now, I think from a sort of our spiritual heritage, we come at marriage in a different way. And I think rather than, you know, get into partisan fighting, I think he's going to exalt and maybe put in better detail the beauty and the challenges of marriage in the Christian tradition. And I don't think he's that same-sex marriage is going to be the key to his visit here.
You knew the guy some people call the People's Pope. What don't we know about him? I mean, you knew him before he was the Pope. Can you take us maybe behind the scenes and just tell us who this gentleman is that we think we know?
Well, I met him in 2005 when we were both part of a Spanish-speaking working group during the Synod of Bishops at that year. And we talked every day. I sat next to him, and I just knew him as the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, Argentina. But I recall one day when we were having coffee, you know, you have to remember, this synod took place about 6 months after the election of Benedict XVI, and there were rumors that the Bishop of Buenos Aires came close. So I was kind of given a bad time during the coffee break, and I said, you know, everybody's happy with Pope Benedict, but I said, I have to tell you, you were my mother's candidate. And he looked at me like I was nuts. He said, how does your mother know me? I said, well, she read in the newspaper that you pick up after yourself, and that you cook your own food, and that you drive a modest car. And I said, frankly, Cardinal, she's headed up to here with princes of the church. Well, he laughed, and 5 years later, when I started working in the Vatican, I get this letter from Buenos Aires, and it's Jorge Bergoglio, and he says, I heard about your new mission, and I'm praying for it, and I remember our nice conversations, and I remember your mother's good taste. So.
Archbishop Tobin, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Good.
You're always so kind. Thank you, sir.
Good. I hope it's useful.
Always useful. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Right.
Coming up, the raging debate over the U.S. deal with Iran. Has the president won the battle in Congress? And what will happen next on Capitol Hill? Indiana Republican Congressman Larry Bouchon joins us next on Indianapolis This Week. Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. We turn our attention now to the nation's capital. Congress about to head back into session after the August recess, with several major issues looming, including the deal with Iran and some lawmakers threatening a government shutdown over the funding for Planned Parenthood. Both key votes for Republicans on Capitol Hill. Our Todd Connor is with Republican Congressman Larry Bouchon.
Joining me now is Representative Larry Bouchon. Congressman, thank you very much for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Let's start off with Iran. Is the deal that the president has put together, is that going to be a done deal at this point?
Well, first of all, I don't think it's a good deal for America for a variety of reasons, and I'd encourage your viewers to look at my official website. Just Google my name, Bouchon, and look at the reasons. But in short, you know, it frees up a lot of assets, financial assets, for the Iranian government. It doesn't have inspections anytime, anywhere. And honestly, the Iranians really can't be, I don't think, trusted to comply with the agreement. And it also frees up their ability to develop a ballistic missile and to buy arms from the Russians and others within 5 to 8 years. So I think looking at the agreement, and I've read the agreement, it's just not the right agreement for America. I think that, in my view, we should tighten sanctions and continue to negotiate. Now, practically, it will get rejected by Congress, but I think the president will likely veto that, and whether or not we can sustain that or not, I don't know.
A lot of folks feeling the same way as you feel, and feel like a bad deal is worse than no deal.
I think that's right. I mean, the majority of the House and the Senate are going to vote against this deal, and then when you look at what the American people think and what my constituents think, across the country, it's almost 2-to-1 against, and that includes some states, you know, that are presidential swing states, for example. So that's important for them. But for the people that I represent, the vast majority of people don't think it's a good deal for the United States.
Let's move on to Planned Parenthood now. There's a move to Congress wanting to defund it.
Yeah.
Where is that going to go when you head back to Washington?
Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to start some investigations on the videos and actually have some of the people in the videos come testify in front of Congress. And my committee, the Energy and Commerce Committee, will be one of the committees doing that. And I think that's important. That said, historically, I've supported not allowing federal funds to go to Planned Parenthood. And let me tell you why. Only a third of their budget nationally goes to, comes from the federal government. The rest is private funding.
Right.
And so the argument that if the federal funding goes away, they won't be able to provide women's services is just not factual.
But that is a big chunk of their budget. I mean,
it's a third
anybody gets their budget cut by a third.
Yeah, it's a third of their budget. What that will do, see, is that will force them to make a decision. Will they continue to provide really almost 350,000 abortions every year and the things that we saw in the video that goes with it? And will they choose to provide the care that is absolutely necessary for low-income women, which I support, and I support them doing that. So I think that discussion will come up. We'll see where the investigation goes. I do think, you know, defunding Planned Parenthood at the national level is something that will be discussed. I've supported that in the past. But, you know, a lot of their funding comes from the Medicaid program, which is federal funding technically. So, you know, it's defunding Planned Parenthood completely and completely turning off federal dollars is a difficult thing to do because it's partially Medicaid. So,
and I think Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has come out and said that he thinks it's going to take a new president maybe to get this done because you might not have the vote.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Governor Pence has put together a new task force to deal with some of the drug problems and drug abuse we're facing here in Indiana. Anything the feds can be doing to help out states like Indiana? Is there anything that you see that, well, maybe we get some more federal dollars to help in this? Well,
yeah, there actually is, and we're looking at options on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and we've had about 5 or 6 hearings about the problem of prescription drug abuse.
Right.
And prescription drug is a gateway drug to heroin. And what we're finding is, even though methamphetamine has been a big problem, the abuse of prescription medication, 80% of which were prescribed for legitimate reasons initially, is becoming a gateway for people to get into heroin. And what happens is once people are addicted to the prescription drugs, and then for whatever reason that ends or the cost becomes too high for them to do it, they're leaning towards heroin. And so we've had hearings talking to stakeholders, both from the state, from the federal government agencies, and I do think there are some avenues there to hopefully assist with the prescription drug problem and subsequently down the line hopefully stop the heroin issue that we have going on.
One last thing I want to touch on with you is the GOP presidential race.
Yeah.
One of the latest polls out of Iowa shows that Trump and Ben Carson are tied for the lead there, and coming up in third place is Carly Fiorina. So you have the top 3 in Iowa. Not career politicians, not politicians at all. What's that say about the state of the presidential race?
Well, I think it's wide open. And, you know, I wasn't a politician before I was in Congress. I was a cardiovascular surgeon.
Right.
And so I understand that concept. You know, I came.
It's not a bad thing, is it?
No, it's a good thing for people to step forward, you know, and run for office. And so I think the race is wide open. I think what you're seeing is the American people really, you know, are tired of the political class in Washington, D.C., and really anywhere in the country, because you know, we've not been able to really accomplish a lot of things that the American people have wanted us to do, really, in fairness, not just since I've been in Congress, but you know, for quite a while. And here's the thing, though: there's a lot of good people in Washington, D.C. On both sides of the aisle. And I think that frustration is warranted, don't get me wrong. But I think people are looking for candidates that speak the truth, that have honesty, are trustworthy, that are likable.
Right.
And sometimes policy views are really secondary to those things. And so that's what you're seeing. I've met Ben Carson, very impressive. I've met Carly Fiorina, very impressive. I've never met Mr. Trump. But, you know, you're seeing a consistent pattern across the country, really in both political parties, I will argue at the end of the day,
right.
For people wanting new blood. And so I think it's a good thing. It's early in the race, and I'm like you. I want to see how it turns out.
It's very early in the race, too. You're right. Congressman Bouchon, thank you very much for joining us. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right.
Thank you.
Raphael, back to you.
Todd, thank you. We also talked to the congressman about a possible increase in the federal gas tax to pay for highway construction, a plan that could also come before Congress this fall. We'll have more on that tomorrow on the news at 5. It's a group of moms that started in a Zionsville home after the Sandy Hook school shooting. Now Moms Demand Action is launching a new effort on the nation's capital. We'll have details on that next on Indianapolis This Week. Welcome back to Indianapolis This Week. We turn the focus now to gun violence, forefront in the news here in central Indiana. In addition to the murders of police officers in Illinois and Texas, and the killings of 2 journalists on live television in Virginia. The gun advocacy group Moms Demand Action, which started its work in Zionsville, will take to Washington on Thursday. They're kicking off a campaign under the hashtags Demand a Vote and Whatever It Takes. Welcome to the program. You're making a demand. But what is the demand?
The demand is that our elected officials take action to keep our families safe from gun violence.
And so on Thursday, you'll have thousands of people, presumably, on Capitol Hill. But what will be different about this time? You know, we've heard this movement before. We've heard the call for action. But what will be different?
I think what's going to be special about Thursday is in D.C., Andy Parker is going to be present. Andy is the father of Allison Parker, who was so tragically killed on live television. And we all stand with Andy when he said, whatever it takes to keep our families safe is what we're going to do. And so Thursday, there'll be Andy and his family, there'll be survivors from Newtown, there'll be folks from our own Indianapolis community there standing together to ask our elected officials to take action.
But we've seen children killed in Newtown. We've seen a police officer just killed the last couple of days in Illinois. And people will say, we've seen these stories before. The country has not moved. What will be different? What will galvanize the country to say, maybe you have a point?
You know, it's been a horrific summer. We have seen time after time mass shootings, and I think we've reached the point where, as a society, we have said we can do better than this. We know that America is better than this. You've heard from Second Amendment groups that will say, look, here's the media again, joining up with the soccer mom or soccer moms. They're going to try to take our guns away when you know that the Constitution says that they have a right to bear arms. So how do you deal with that argument from people who are afraid that this is really a movement to take people's guns? I agree that I'm a Second Amendment supporter. I agree that we have a right to bear arms. I grew up with guns in the house, and I'm a target shooter, and I have a 9-year-old who's a heck of a shot. So I don't want anybody's guns, but what we want is to keep our families safe from gun violence. You're going to ask people to take a pledge of sorts. You brought, what is the pledge? And I'm going to let you hold that. Sure. What are you hoping Congress will do? We are asking people to take to social media with the hashtag whatever it takes, which is what Allison's dad said on TV. And we're asking people to tell Congress how they feel. This is the one that I put out there, which says, Dear Congress, I feel hopeful because you love your kids too. And on Thursday in Indianapolis, we'll have these signs available for people to fill them out and take their own picture on social media and post it with the hashtag whatever it takes. Give us an idea then. Take us to Washington on this Sunday. I know Thursday's now 5 days away. Give us an idea what you hope will be the mood in Washington and how you will hope to engage those Congress people that are returning back from the August recess. We will be covering Washington from one side to the other. We're going to be in the subway stations. We're going to be on the streets. We're going to be on Capitol Hill and telling them wherever they go that they cannot get away from this because we can't get away from it in our communities. And it's time for them to pass universal background checks so that we can keep the guns out of the hands of dangerous people. Will this be
be an ongoing campaign, or is this a one-day where you do a big thing on Thursday and then just sort of do things once in a while for the rest of the year?
You know, Thursday is a big day of action across the country, but this is an ongoing effort until we get it done. We understand that this is a marathon, not a sprint. We started up in the days after Sandy Hook, and we won't stop until we fix the problem.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your time. We come back to the program anytime.
Thank you so much.
We'll be right back. You may have noticed something missing today, our political insiders. It's rather quiet around these parts. Lara, Abdul, and the whole gang received the holiday weekend off, but they'll be back next Sunday. It'll be a little bit much more noisier in the studio. You can follow them right now on Twitter. And of course, while you're there, follow our political information on our official Twitter account at Indy This Week for news and updates every day of the week, 24/7. Thank you for joining us today. Stay with RTV6 and the RTV6 app as we continue to track the heat throughout central Indiana on this holiday weekend. Enjoy your Labor Day. Enjoy that barbecue. Have a great day. And remember, we'll see you next week right here for Indianapolis This Week.